Donald Trump is back and is set to be stronger and more ruthless than ever. Trump has promised to make America great again, and this team he's assembled says a lot about his plan to do this. There was a clear pattern to his picks, and it's not the sort of thing you'd see on a resume.
So I think it's pretty obvious that what he's prioritizing above everything else is loyalty. But also, I think it's apparent that what Donald Trump judges people on is how they perform largely on television. How telegenic are they? How devoted are they to his cause when they are under question by the media?
Let's start with Elon Musk, Trump's most high-profile appointment. At first, this sudden friendship seemed kind of odd. What would the world's richest renewable energy advocate want with a leader whose environmental policies...
We're gonna drill, baby, drill.
Consider this. Musk already had billions of dollars in business ties to the US government, but this new cost-cutting role, that could make Musk unstoppable.
It'll depend on how much power this new Department of Government Efficiency ends up having. Is this a role that is going to have real power? And that's where it becomes a problem, because you're going to have a situation with Elon Musk, who has all these government contracts, he has government subsidies, he has lots of interest in government policy towards his companies and government regulation. You're going to have him overseeing that policy and overseeing that regulation. And that's just not, by any measure, an acceptable situation in a democracy. You can't have a business leader who is creating government policy that affects his own companies. That's just a recipe for corruption.
But how long will this Trump-Musk bromance last? Remember, these are two big personalities who have publicly traded insults for years.
He told me he voted for me. So he's another bullshit artist.
They're clearly not afraid to say what they think. Or are they?
What I suspect is that they will try to avoid conflict where they can. These are guys who tend to talk a big game, but they don't actually tend to be very confrontational in person. This is why Donald Trump, in his first term, he fired a fair few people, but he didn't do it in person. He sent them letters. He made a staffer do it. But if it does come to it, I would expect Elon Musk to fold first. And I think that's partly because he's made his priorities quite clear. This isn't a green energy electric car warrior anymore. This is a guy who is mainly an alt-right culture warrior these days.
Despite his power and influence, Musk is not one of Trump's most controversial picks. This is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., nephew of former President John F. Kennedy and incoming health secretary.
And I was at the bottom of my class. I started doing heroin. I went to the top of my class. Suddenly I could sit still and I could read.
And yes, that interview clip is very real. RFK Jr. is a well-known vaccine skeptic. Back in 2005, he wrote this article for Rolling Stone and Salon claiming, with no credible evidence, that vaccines cause autism. His views haven't changed, and today he runs an NGO devoted to anti-vaccine messaging. In 2012, he claimed during a deposition that he was suffering cognitive decline due to a worm that ate a portion of his brain and then died in it.
RFK Jr. is a guy who has no experience in health. His previous career before he entered politics was as an environmental lawyer. And he's best known these days for having what could only be called conspiracy theories about health policy. This is the person that is being put in charge of massive health programs like Medicare and Medicaid, medical investment in the United States, drug research, things that RFK has actually said he wants to halt for a period of 8 years. And that's going to have real consequences, not just for Americans, but for the rest of the world, which relies on American innovation when it comes to drugs and medical treatments and whatnot.
Let's move on to Fox News TV host Pete Hegseth, another cabinet pick that raised eyebrows. As the incoming Secretary of Defense, Hegseth is responsible for the department that's mission is to deter war and ensure the security of the US and its allies. Hegseth served in the army after graduating from college, but he has no national security or senior military experience.
We're talking about a department here that has about 700,000 civilian employees, and it oversees about 2.5 million military personnel, including National Guard. That is a vast bureaucracy. It's one of the biggest bureaucracies and responsibilities in the world. He's chosen a TV host to fill that post.
But now, let's go to the big one, and for this we go to Tom Homan, Trump's border czar. Of all of Trump's policies, his pledges, his promises to the American people, nothing was more important than this.
We are going to start the largest mass deportation in the history of our country because we have no choice. It's not sustainable.
When you think of Trump's policies, the wall is probably the first thing you think of. In his last term, he built around 800 kilometers along the US-Mexico border.
Donald Trump and his staff have made it very clear that they do intend to follow through on their plan to do a mass deportation of illegal immigrants, people who've been in the country sometimes for decades. but who did not come legally. And this is a massive, massive endeavor for the government. It's going to cost hundreds of billions of dollars. It's going to require some extremely difficult logistics and some really, really awkward optics, is a polite way of putting it.
The wall was also a symbol, a simple, tangible way to cut through. But here's the problem with symbols like that. They can quickly break down when something's easier said than done.
You have to remember, if you're going to deport something above 10 million people, that's his stated policy, that's going to involve a lot of really, really difficult decisions and difficult optics for the government. It's going to involve law enforcement and, according to Trump and his staff, perhaps even the military, going door to door in American neighborhoods, detaining people. It's going to involve ripping people away from their families. Some of these family members are American citizens. It's going to involve removing people from their homes that they've lived in for decades in some cases. And it's going to involve, it has to involve, just by definition, massive detention camps. And you can't just immediately chuck them out of the country. That's not how it works. You have to detain them, you have to obtain permission or consent from the country you're going to send them to before you can remove them. So necessarily that's going to involve huge camps. There is going to be some sort of backlash when you start detaining those people and trying to chuck them out of the country.
But what about beyond American borders? As we speak, the brutal wars being waged in Gaza and Ukraine show no signs of slowing down. Come January, Trump will be the new peacekeeper. The most telling sign of how Trump will approach the Israel-Palestine war is right here. Mike Huckabee, his ambassador to Israel, a choice that sends a clear message.
There is no such thing as a West Bank. It's Judea and Samaria. There's no such thing as a settlement. They're communities, they're neighborhoods, they're cities.
Huckabee is someone who doesn't actually believe that there is an Israeli occupation of the West Bank or Gaza. He actually believes that those areas are straight up rightfully Israeli territory. The stated goal of the United States and most of the international community is still a two-state solution, but that's not particularly compatible when you're staffing your administration with people who don't believe that there should be a Palestinian state. So, look, it was a political issue in the election and it was a problem for the Democrats, but they're not going to get what they want under a Trump administration. They're going to have to come to terms with the fact that they've elected an American government which is going to be more pro-Israel, it's going to be more hostile to Palestinian concerns.
Then there's the war in Europe. The United States remains actively involved in supporting Ukraine with military aid, intelligence, and logistical support. But with Trump's America First focus, not to mention his polarizing relationship with Vladimir Putin, that could shift dramatically.
Donald Trump himself has been a little bit cagey about what exactly he's going to do regarding the Ukraine conflict. He's said that he could solve it within 24 hours upon becoming president. He's never said how. He's never said, is he going to force Ukraine to the table to negotiate with Putin and perhaps give up some of the territory he's already taken. He's never said if he's going to cut off military aid from the United States, which would hamstring Ukraine and probably force it to reach some sort of negotiated agreement with the country that's invaded it.
Trump and his new administration will officially take office on January 20. Whether they achieve what they've promised over the next 4 years is yet to be seen. But all things considered, we're in for a bumpy ride.